So this is kind of how it all got started. That's my sister Jacqueline. Obviously that's me. We were at a pork processing facility there. But I have to give a shout out to my sister. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she's the reason that I got into pet food, because like I said, I was human and food science nutritionist, and she brought me into the pet world in 2009 when she decided to start her own pet food company. And I was very grateful that she did. I've always been a huge advocate for pets and obviously an animal lover. So collectively, but I want to give a big shout out to Chelsea Kent, who started Solutions. She kind of kept a good thing going, I guess is what I would have to say, from the family business that we started. Was the first fermented raw food diet on the market. And Chelsea has she has a store in Littleton, Colorado, and she sold a ton of that food and did really well and really understood it. And she is extremely experienced and knowledgeable herself. She's been in this business a long time. She started Heroes Pets in Littleton in 2007. She's a self-taught herbalist and incredibly knowledgeable. So I'm super grateful to have her as a partner and for her to continue this. But one of the most unique things I like to point out is our sourcing, our Amish farms that are local in this area. So Likens Valley, Elizabethville, Honeybrook, Lancaster. We have farms that are have dairy goat farms, milk farms for us that we pull a lot of our sourcing from. We have on the farm fermented vegetables that are being fermented on the farm. So everything that even though I live in Oregon, we manufacture here in Likens, Pennsylvania, and most of our farms and a lot of our sourcing come locally from here. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to try to go through it kind of quickly, and if we can save questions till the end, because it's a lot of information. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think everyone in this room would agree that our dogs are carnivores, our cats are carnivores, right? And we need to feed them like a carnivore. And so for that reason, dogs have a different digestive system than omnivores and herbivores, and we need to recognize that, and we need to feed them for the correct digestive system that they do have. So you'll see in our dogs and our cats, they have high enzyme concentration in their saliva. They're really not, this is an arguable point, and Dr. Hyde probably would know too, amylase really isn't present in the saliva. Some of the high carbohydrate pet food companies would argue that they have produced amylase in their saliva to digest carbohydrates, but if you look at the wolf, their evolutionary ancestors, there's no amylase in their saliva to digest carbohydrates, and that's what that's for. Teeth and jaw, obviously, for tearing and ripping and gulping large amounts of food. Their GI system, it's quick, it's short. So small cecum, that's very indicative of a very quick transit time in digestion. If you look at a herbivore, their cecum is huge, it's long, and that's because they have to digest all those plant fibers, and they have cellulase enzyme to do that. We don't make the cellulase enzyme, and neither do our pets, so we can't digest that plant material, and that's why we're really designed to eat the animals that are digesting the plants for us, and that's kind of how that works. So very fast digest and transit, and that'll be apparent when I talk about why we put fermented ingredients in our food and why that's helpful in pre-digestion. So next slide. So this is the Forever Dog book. Great book, really good reference. Dr. Karen Becker, Rodney Habib, I'm sure a lot of you probably follow them. They do a great job. But I just wanted to present, this is the most prevalent health issues we're facing in our dog and cat population right now. I think Dr. Hyde would agree, cancer is off the charts. It's by the time a dog reaches 9 or 10, you got a 1 in 50 shot, a 50-50 shot of your dog getting cancer. Obesity, just like our human population, our dog population has gotten extremely overweight and obese. Dental disease, again, from not eating a species appropriate diet, eating all those carbohydrates, eating dry food, that actually promotes tartar and plaque buildup and the wrong type of bacteria in the mouth. And so that's one reason we see a lot of dental disease. I probably get at least maybe 1 or 2, sometimes even one every week, but 2 or 3 a month, clients that call and say, my dog was just diagnosed with kidney disease. My dog's in early stage kidney disease. My dog has CKD. What can I do for kidney disease? I mean, I probably counsel at least 2 to 3 clients a month on what to do for kidney disease. And then heart disease, of course. So another great book is Henry Pasternak. He's a retired veterinarian now out on the West Coast. Wrote a book called Curing Dogs with Nature's Miracle Cures, or
is it healing?
Healing Pets. There's a pet there in the way. Sorry, Healing Pets with Nature's Miracle Cures. And he talks about raw food and how feeding dogs an appropriate diet, their raw diet, their evolutionary diet, can increase their lifespan by 183%. Wow. That's 3 years. That's a long time. So right now we're looking at an average of 10 to 11 years if we're lucky for most of our pets. Now I'll go on to the next slide. So just by a show of hands, how many people in this room have witnessed a dog get to 30 years old? Anyone?
I saw it on the internet once.
Okay, that doesn't count. I mean, like, you know a person, you saw the dog, know how old they live. How about 25? Everybody's here see a dog get 21? That's pretty good. Okay, so our dogs are living a short life, and we know that a lot of that is due to diet, but it's also environmental toxins. It's also a lot of stress in their environment. So Bobby was the world's oldest dog, and Guinness took it away from him when they found out that they didn't have all the evidence there, but there were many people that could vouch for Bobby being 31 years old. He just recently died. And Maggie, she was an Australian shepherd on an Australian dairy farm. So guess what Maggie ate? Maggie made it to 31 too. Raw dairy. So yep, he had a cow dairy, and she would get the milk. But guess what else she ate? She would eat the placenta after the cows would calf, and she would get into that. Additionally, he was a farmer, and he butchered his own lamb and other hogs and things on his farm, and then he would give her the scraps. So she got the scraps from their home butchering. She got raw dairy from their cow dairy and their Holstein dairy, and then placenta when she could sneak in. Next slide, ma'am. Yeah. So this is one of the things that I'd like to stress, because this is really what we're trying to avoid. Leaky gut or leaky gut syndrome, or IBD, is kind of an umbrella term for basically inflammation of the gut that's gone so awry and so bad that the gut has now become porous. And there's actually microscopic pores that happen between these cells in the epithelial lining of the gut, which there's a very thin barrier there that goes right to the bloodstream. So if that is not shored up and tight, those junctions in the cells, and that's not a healthy lining, then what we see is partially digested food or not completely digested food, toxins and such are able to get through the gut, and now you start to see food intolerances, immune abnormalities, and basically autoimmune conditions. So that's your dog getting, skin problems, hot spots, allergies, and infections in the ears. This all manifests, this dysbiosis of the gut all manifests on the surface. It becomes systemic. So it will show itself in a lot of different ways, but basically it's you fix the gut and you fix the animal. And there's a really great human doctor called Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, if any of you heard of her. She was a neurosurgeon. She went back to school to get a degree in nutrition because she had a 2-year-old son that was diagnosed with autism. And being a neurosurgeon, she was very frustrated because she felt like she couldn't help her son. So she went back and learned about nutrition, and she put a diet together called the GAPS diet, and it's called the gut and psychology syndrome, or gut and physiology syndrome diet. And basically it's repairing the gut through fixing the leaky gut and keeping those toxins and undigested food particles from going right into the bloodstream and creating those allergic reactions. Next slide. So I would say the 100 trillion friends you didn't know you have. Microorganism diversity is canine health, okay, and that goes for all of us too. And we're finding that through ultra-processed foods, through a lot of sterilizations in our immediate environments, through not enough time outside, not enough time in the soil, you name it, they're staying indoors more, our pets, as we are, and so they're not getting the exposure to the diversity of microorganisms that they would have evolved with. And for that reason, we're seeing these gut problems, these dysbiosis, and these imbalance in the gut starting to happen. So how do we get good bacteria and diversity, a diversified bacteria back into these animals? Well, obviously we don't want to give them ultra-processed sterilized food, but we want to give them food that's safe and is healthy for them and is going to re-inoculate that gut. Next slide. So one of the ways that this is just for me, like it made sense to me when I was watching a YouTube video about the reintroduction of the wolves into Yellowstone. And the wild biologist, this is a fascinating story, and I really employ you guys to go and look at it on YouTube because it's a wonderful video. And so in the 1920s, we basically hunted the wolves in Yellowstone to extinction, and they were gone out of the ecosystem. And as a result of that, the elk population exploded, right? And you would expect that because that's, they're an apex predator, and they were no longer, the elk were no longer hunted by them. This created a whole cascade of effects of the rest of the lower chain of animals on the lower of the food chain that actually changed the environment of Yellowstone on a macro scale, okay? So finally, some very knowledgeable wildlife biologists said, I think we need to reintroduce the wolf. This is their natural ecosystem. They belong here. They have a purpose, right? So in 1995, I think it was, they reintroduced the wolf to Yellowstone, and they knew that they were going to get an effect from that. They expected that, but the effect that they did get was more amazing than they ever imagined. And so when the elk population came back into control and the coyotes were not over hunting the rodents came back in, the beavers came back in. And when the beavers came back in, they actually started building their dams again in these rivers. And the whole river changed on the direction it was going. And all of these birch trees all came back. Some of these raptors and other birds came back that hadn't been there in 30 years or longer. So it was just, sorry.
What do you do?
I don't know. Just hit enter. Hit enter, yeah.
Battery on the projector.
Oh,
Is that?
it should be plugged in.
Oh, no.
Did it kick?
Did it kick off?
How long do wolves live?
Here.
I'm
What's
sorry.
the lifespan of a wolf?
I think that's debatable. I think it is only maybe 12 to 15 years old, but they live in a lot harsher environment and so forth. But I think some of them can get pretty old. Dr. Kurt,
Yeah, well, I think when they die, most of them getting injured.
that's what, yeah. It's
What was
not
that?
necessarily of old age. I'm sorry, we're having technical
Injured. Oh.
That's, and it's not a long show on YouTube. I watched it.
Yes.
After you talked about it once.
Yes.
And
What's it called?
it's
Just
amazing how it,
Google reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. It's an
yeah.
incredible video.
What
It's
was it?
worth
I mean,
watching.
everything that came
Reintroduction
back
of
was
Yellowstone.
outrageous, Things they didn't imagine.
It's coming back.
Is it? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, apologies.
I knew there would be.
And I'm sorry if I'm talking fast, but I want to make sure that we get through it so we have time for questions.
There we go, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so the reason I wanted to put this slide up is because this is a macro ecosystem, right? An ecosystem we can see on a large scale. And look what happened when we took one organism, that of course it's an apex predator, it's a very important one, but look what happened when we took one organism out of that environment. How it actually, broke down, it was not thriving, it was not at its full capability. And when we reintroduced that predator, that dangerous predator, right, that yes, does kill cattle at times and can threaten the farm livestock, but when we reintroduce that ecosystem came back. That's what's happening on a micro scale, okay, on our skin, in our gut, everywhere, and we can't see it, right? It's invisible to us. But we know that it is a micro ecosystem, and it requires a lot of diversity and requires a lot of interaction with all the different kinds of bacteria. So if we go in there and we just start slamming sterilization and start wiping out everything, or even specific pathogens maybe that are what we consider opportunistic pathogens, right? So we're exposed to them all the time, maybe they're in our environment, maybe we're harboring them in our gut right now, but they're not getting us sick, right? But if our immune system's down, or we get some other kind of infection or something, they can be opportunistic pathogens, and then they cause a problem. But nonetheless, we live with them in our environment, and we have to realize that our pets do too, and they may be important, right? We don't really know. We know that maybe they get us sick, and so we'll say, okay, we want to avoid them, but they may be doing something in that micro ecosystem that's very important to keeping it balanced and keeping it regulated. So if we just go in and use all these harsh sterilization methods, what are we really doing to the balance of that micro ecosystem? So that's my example on that. Next slide. So nutrigenomics, just by a show of hands, does anybody know what that term is or has heard that term? Anybody know Jean Dodds, famous veterinarian? Okay, yep, she's done a lot. It's a great book. I read her book. Excellent book, Canine Nutrigenomics. So basically this is saying that the previous dogma in the scientific world was that our DNA was what we got. Like we either got the genetic lottery or we just got a bad ticket, and there wasn't much we could do about it. It was in our DNA, or the DNA was contained in the nucleus, and there wasn't much we could do to change it or its expression. That since has been debunked quite a bit, and now we look at terms called epigenetics and nutrigenomics. And this is basically saying our environment, along with the food we eat, does have a huge significance on the expression of our genes, okay, and what we express into, not only as a child, but into our adulthood. So we can either be eating food and being in a low stress environment that's going to help us express those positive genes and repress the genes that might be for cancer or for some autoimmune disease. And so what we eat, especially when we have a developing fetus in utero, and then what we eat as soon as we are born, whether we're a puppy or an infant, has an extreme impact on what we will express into adulthood. And it's sort of the newer science, but we're learning a lot about it, and it's incredibly important to understand that, because we see so many genetic sort of abnormalities, right, breed specific and things like that have cropped up over the years, and whether, a lot of people say, well, maybe it's from overbreeding or bad breeding, or a lot of it could be with that food, the ultra processed food that these dog parents are eating into the infant as well. So really good book. I really recommend it. Next one. So this is an interesting example of nutrigenomics and how it works. So this is an agouti mouse, and an agouti mouse tends to have the genes for obesity and also yellow fur, okay? But what they found out in doing research on these mice is that agouti gene can actually be silenced in pups when the mom is on a proper diet and is supplemented with specific nutrients that can silence those genes. So you'll see the top picture is the agouti mouse, an agouti female bred to an agouti male, and they of course have an agouti offspring. When you supplement B12, folic acid, choline, and betaine, which is a type of enzyme, to the mom, that was enough to suppress the agouti gene and have a normal weight, normal color mouse.
Brown mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So that's epigenetics at work, or nutrigenomics at work. It's saying the nutrition we get as a mom, and the dad too as well, is extremely crucial in what that offspring is going to express. Next. So a couple studies that have been done, this is Science Daily, and what they showed was what we're saying kind of about the genetic development or the expression of genes later in life in these dogs. And a puppy's diet can be a significant factor in the development of allergy or atopy or related, so skin problems. We see a lot of that in dogs, itchiness, flakiness, dryness. And so just by doing 20% of their diet, if they were a kibble fed dog with fresh foods, fresh and raw foods, they were able to see a significant decrease in the appearance of those allergic symptoms and atopy. So this is a little bit of an informal feeding trial that we're doing. Gabby is well aware of this because she's been to, and I don't know Lucas, if you have gone out to Ivan's
I
kennel.
have not, but Sophia's actually gone and helped draw the blood and everything.
Oh, you have? Awesome. Okay, so Sophia knows the kennel I'm talking about. So Ivan Stolfus has Stony Meadows. It is a very sustainable and reputable kennel that he has for breeding, and he has agreed to do some feeding trials for us. And he is supplementing several of his females with his breeding pairs with raw food. And we're doing, so Chelsea also has a company called Parsley Pet. They're a laboratory that does hair and tissue mineral analysis. So you take the hair from your dog, send it in, and they can do a mineral analysis on that. And that report will give a lot of clues as to what kind of health your dog is having, or if they have toxicities in mercury or aluminum. And it can show you imbalances in hormones as well. I learned this from Chelsea. It was great.
People too.
Oh, yeah, people, horses, and dogs right now are the ones that they're set up to do. But I highlighted this because when I talked to Ivan, he said the most significant thing that he saw when he introduced raw to his females and then the pups, the offspring, was that he saw significant decrease in parasites, managing the parasites, where Giardia and Coccidia are two big ones that tend to be in this area. And he didn't have to use metronidazole or Penetel to intercede with parasites. He was getting negative results just by feeding those pups the raw food. And again, that's a fermented raw diet, so they're getting that introduction of a lot of good probiotics and better bacteria. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll get into the products and into solutions. So one of our signature products is our goat milk, and Chelsea took our goat milk to the next level with her prowess in herbs and understanding herbs, and she put different herbs in each of these, but they're all cultured goat milk. Okay, so when I say cultured, that's basically we add additional probiotic bacteria to the milk. So raw milk in and of itself is going to have natural microflora, right? Because we're not pasteurizing it. And so they found some studies that have been done on raw milk. They found over a diversity of 200 different species in raw milk, just as it sits. And then we add additional, what we call starter cultures. And the way we do that is through raw whey. So we make cheese, as Marianne was saying, the dough Persian cheese, that's a raw goat milk cheese. And when we make that, we collect the whey. So there's still lots of lactic acid bacteria in that whey. And so we just inoculate that back into the fresh milk, and now you have a cultured product. And once we have that, then we can just freeze it and go from there. But next slide.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we make yogurt and we overstrain it, and we've been feeding the whey to our
Beautiful.
dog as part of his diet. He loves it.
It's wonderful supplement. Yeah, because your casein proteins are staying with the yogurt and the cheese, but you have all that whey protein, and then you still have those lactic acid cultures. You got tons of enzymes in there. Awesome supplement. Keep doing it. That's great. Yeah. So the tech sauce, I know these are funny names, and there's a long story behind the naming conventions in what Chelsea picked here, and I won't go into that. But this is, it's named after the Texas regulation that Texas makes us colored milk to ship it into Texas. You all live in such a great state here. You're very lucky to be in Pennsylvania to have access to raw dairy, lots of raw products, lots of regenerative farms here. So please use them, support them, buy your local dairy and treats from them. It's such a good thing to have, and Texas and the western states have a lot of restrictions on this. So what we did with this is, again, it's raw goat milk, about 97%. It gets that inoculation of whey, and then we ferment turmeric and ginger, and we actually take the root, the turmeric root, the ginger root, and we shred those up, and we put them in a salt brine, and we let them do a wild ferment. That's what's called a wild ferment. If any of you guys here want an awesome book on home fermentation and doing all this yourself, look up Sandor Katz, Wild Fermentation, Sandor Katz, Katz, awesome book. He gives you a whole plethora of ideas on how to do it at home. But if you don't want to take the time to do it at home, we'll do it for you. So that's
Tex sauce is one of the most popular.
it is. I think it's one of the most popular. It's very palatable. I drink it. It's a really yummy treat.
What is that? What do you
The
drink?
Tex sauce?
The Texas.
Yeah, it's raw goat milk with fermented ginger and fermented turmeric in it. And it's not real strong. You guys can try it, and it's not a real strong. But this is for liver health. So if you had, like, if somebody called me up and said, my dog's recovering from pancreatitis, or has chronic pancreatitis, or had an attack of acute pancreatitis, I would suggest fasting the dog for 2 to 3 days on nothing but this Tex sauce. So turmeric is a great fat emulsifier. The goat milk itself is very great for digestion, and the ginger is very calming and kind of an analgesic to the stomach. So dogs have recovered really well from acute pancreatic attacks just drinking this product. Next slide.
So we can drink it too?
Yeah, and our next one is the goat nog. This is one of my favorites because this is like
And now it's-
reproductive foods at its best, right? So raw milk. Of course, milk is what we all have. We're all mammals, and that's what we all get. Our first food of life, whether we're a dog, a kitten, or a human, is raw milk. So that's what we call a reproductive food. And then eggs, of course, are another one of Mother Nature's most balanced reproductive foods. And these are these are Mother Nature's vitamin supplements. These are all balanced and have basically everything that you need in food. So we put a tiny bit of honey in there, and that honey, if you want to impress your friends with a really long term, say, oh, honey has fructooligosaccharides in it. And that's a really good prebiotic to feed your probiotics. So you can impress your friends with fructooligosaccharides. And that is in here to feed the probiotics. This one would be great if you have a kitten or a puppy, or God forbid a little rabbit or something, any mammal that might have been abandoned by mom and has been weaned too soon and you don't know what to do. Great milk replacer. So instead of using KMR or Espalac, you could use goat nog, and that will cover all your bases. Next slide.
It said something about, the insulin for the goat milk, something about for insulin, so would that be good for diabetes?
I think what they're saying, cinnamon is good for insulin regulation and blood sugar, but it's just a pinch in there. It's just a small amount, but I think that's what Chelsea was saying
And
in
it's
that
that's
slide.
Ceylon, right? Is it the
It is the Ceylon
Yeah.
cinnamon.
I mean, it's
yes.
all the best.
Instead of the cassia, it's
Yeah.
the Ceylon, which is the inner part of the cinnamon. This is our tummy butter kefir. So when I talk about cultured milks, does anyone know the difference between like fermented and cultured? So they're often used interchangeably, and there's really no strict standard of identity for either one of them. So I'll often even use them interchangeably. But our tummy butter is a true kefir, so it's a true ferment. And what I mean by that is we warm the milk and we allow the lactic acid bacteria to start working on the sugars and produce that lactic acid to drop the pH, and that takes about 18 hours. So this is gonna be like your yogurt. This is sour to the taste. This is a little more sour to the palate. But the reason why we wanted to put this in the line is because we use traditional kefir grains in this product. Do any of you grow your own kefir grains or make your own kefir? Okay, you could get them on Etsy, you can get them on, you know, it's kind of like friendship bread and sourdough starter, a lot of people will grow them and pass them on, and that's a great thing. I actually ordered some from Poland, because I wanted kefir grains from the Caucasus Mountains, because they have a very long tradition there of having really good robust bacteria and really good diversity of bacteria. So I gave them to Steve Fisher, our local farmer, and he puts them in our goat milk, and he grows those kefir grains for us and keeps them going. And so each batch that David Esch makes of our kefir, a gallon of the kefir grains go in, and so it's very traditional. But the reason that that's important is because kefir grains also contain yeast, good yeast. So your Saccharomyces boulardii, your Saccharomyces cerevisiae, your Bouvromyces, those are good yeast that will fight candida. So if you have a yeasty dog that's constantly licking their paws, they smell like Fritos, and you know what I mean. This is what you want to put as a supplement into their diet. And so that one, like I said, is a little thicker. It's going to be more sour than the other cultured milks. And this also has an array of herbs in there that is conducive for digestion as well. So peppermint is in there, aloe, which also helps in shoring up. I'm sorry.
What do you think about for acute diarrhea?
This would be great.
Like just fast and then do these alone?
You could do those alone. I would look at our herbal blend of regulator, which is good for sort of just, it's not a long-term thing, but again, for acute diarrhea. And then I would, fast
Okay.
for three
And
days.
which one did you pick, this one?
I would do either, I would do the tummy butter or the goat nog.
Okay.
Either one of those. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So the Better Butter tea, this is a really cool product too, because this has, so if it has tea in the name, just to be specific on that, it's basically goat milk with a shot of herbal tea. So what we did so the tummy butter tea kefir is a kefir, it's a true ferment, it's gonna be more sour, and that has a shot of herbal tea that has peppermint, aloe, and one other herb in there that's conducive for digestion. And then the Better Butter tea, Chelsea wanted to put an herbal blend that was supportive of kidney, because we see so many dogs with kidney disease, and cats as well. And this is all applicable to cats as well. They can have the raw goat milk as well. So you'll see parsley in there. That's a really good detox and a good way to get to absorb minerals. Yucca is an incredible anti-inflammatory, very much like turmeric, but actually a little bit stronger. And then dandelion root is a natural diuretic, but not a strong one. So we want to keep those fluids flowing, and we want to keep the body not retaining fluids. So that's the Better Butter tea goat milk. All right, so now on to jiggles, and there's samples of all of these over at the side table here that you guys can take home. Bone broth, Jiggles is a fancy name for our bone broth. It was a cutesy name that Chelsea wanted to do for it. But because you get gelatin from bone broth, right? So how many here make their own bone broth? Awesome. Yeah, so you just want to make sure your sourcing is good. You're getting really well-sourced bones from animals that, are organic pastures that aren't going to be exposed to a lot of heavy metals or chemicals or pesticides. Bone broth, we should all be drinking bone broth, all of us. It's an excellent way to get your minerals. It's an excellent way for that gelatin. So in the body, it's called collagen, the protein that is in our joints, in our ears, all of that stuff that holds all of our bones together. When we boil those bones, we pull that collagen out and denature it to gelatin, and that's what makes that jello-like substance. And it's super nutritious, and again, very low calorie. This is what you call kind of a superfood because it's so low in calorie but so high in nutrition with its minerals. Next slide. Yeah, so the jiggles, again, sourcing is critical. These are actual pictures from some of our farms. That's David Esch's farm with his pasture-raised pigs. This is Ivan Stolf's farm. That's his laying hens. These are a picture of our sardines. Herring. We have herring and sardines that we use, and that's, I think that's Chris Stolf's farm, Alpine Acres. But incredible tissue support, just a great way to get your amino acids in their singular form, right? So we're breaking down those proteins, we're breaking down that collagen, very supportive of the joints, arthritis, senior dogs that for any kind of malabsorption issues. This is a great way where you just put this on their food, and that will help with the absorption of other foods that are harder to digest. Again, you get that hyaluronic acid. Chelsea, in her knowledge with nutrition, understood that vitamin C is critical in collagen absorption or gelatin absorption, just like we have calcium and vitamin D. All of this stuff works synergistically. So you'll see a fermented component in every one of our jiggles. So for instance, our chicken, do you want to go to the next one?
Sure.
So our fish jiggles have fermented herring, so it's really stinky. But, but it's so
But it's not as
nutritious.
bad as another company.
But very, very nutritious, incredibly supportive of the, not only gut health, but also kidney health. So that gelatin, that high moisture liquid. So I remember sitting in a Weston Price lecture, and Sally Fallon, if you guys, anyone here is a Weston Pricer, was talking about her new book, not Nourishing Tradition, but Nourishing Broth. And the one woman who was extremely experienced in broths was saying that you cannot, there's no other way in nature to get minerals into the body so easily than with bone broth, because you have this colloidal suspension, right? So you can impress your friends with that. Bone broth is a colloidal suspension of minerals, right? So you've all heard of colloidal silver and stuff. And having that in that colloidal suspension is incredibly easy for the body to use. So minerals are very difficult for the body to uptake. They're a cofactor or catalyst in so many metabolic reactions. Even minerals like nickel and copper and things like that are so critical for metabolic reactions in the body. Great way to get it in a good healthy bone broth. And then ours have a little bit value added because we have that additional ferment in there. So they're getting probiotics in this as well with the ferment. So again, we want that diversity of that bacteria. And so we use a Acadian redfish. We get it from the North Atlantic. So it's a whitefish. It says, I know it's redfish, but it's in the whitefish category. We take the bones and we boil them down. And then Steve Fisher has a little fermentation shack that in the stainless steel bins, he'll put the salt and the sardines and some whey in there, and he lets them ferment for 3 days at 100 degrees, and it's down to be a really, it's like the old Asian style fish sauce, but it's incredibly supportive and really good for the immune system. Next slide.
And the mango, it cuts that taste too.
But that's really in there for vitamin C.
Right.
It's still
But
fishy,
it
I'm not
helps.
gonna
It's
lie.
fishy.
My sister used to drink a pint of this a day.
Oh my gosh.
She had a,
Of the
yes.
fish.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So for those with the vitamins, and like if someone had a vitamin D deficiency, could they use that to help with that, or is it not enough in that?
I'll talk about a really good supplement for
Okay,
that in
perfect.
coming up, but I'll give you a better vitamin D supplement for that. So pork. This is our pork and sauerkraut. So we actually take red cabbage and we do that same brine ferment that I was telling you about. We shred the cabbage, put it in the salt brine, and basically make sauerkraut. And then we decant off that sauerkraut juice and add it to our pork jiggles. And again, another one I learned from Weston Price was that you're supposed to eat a ferment every time you eat pork. So that's why pork and sauerkraut is so popular. Yeah, the pork can do something to the blood. I forget, I think it like clots the blood cells or makes them sticky. But if you eat it with a ferment, it doesn't do that. So always eat your pork with fermentation. Next slide. And the cabbage is in there for vitamin C. The beef jiggles is our new one. So we're doing a beef and beet. Again, these are 100% grass-fed bones. So make sure when you see that it's not only grass-fed, it's grass-finished. Yes.
Are the beets organic?
The beets are organic, yeah, of course. Organic beets and also grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And then same thing, we do a traditional ferment on those beets. We decant off that liquid, which is basically kvass, if you guys ever have had kvass, which is beet juice. And put those together here. So you got your vitamin C from the beets, you have incredible healing to incredible antioxidant in the beet, really good for the heart.
What is grass finished? Why is it important?
I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna show you a slide and why that's so important. Next slide. Chicken jiggles. This is a great one. This is that same fermented ginger that's going into the tech sauce, goat milk. We add that to our chicken bone broth as well. So that's a great source of vitamin C. This is Mary Ann's dog Archie's favorite, the chicken nickels. Next slide. Okay, so we'll get on to the diets now. So that, I don't know how well you can see that picture, but that's an actual picture of our Eurobin. That's what that is, a stainless steel Eurobin getting ready to be picked up and put into the grinder. So that is a frozen block of chicken hearts. That's in one big block. That's our parsley. We do it fresh. Our okra is fermented, but the kale and parsley are fresh, but again, they get ground up and so they're broken down. Right now we're doing beef, chicken, and pork, and then when we can get some better sourcing for some of the novel proteins, we'll probably add rabbit and maybe goat or lamb.
How about venison?
Yeah, that's a hard one to source. I haven't found a farm that's doing venison other than the wild caught stuff in Hawaii. And that's, if I brought that in and used that, I'd have to charge about $25 a pound. I don't know if anybody wants to pay that. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, she had the question about grass feeding, right? Okay, this is a study that was done by the USDA. This is so important. And this hits home for me really hard because I actually worked at Jack in the Box before I came into the pet food industry. I admit, for full disclosure, I worked in their R&D department on the burgers and the meat. I was a meat scientist for them, and I worked there after so in 1993 they had one of the worst E. coli incidents, and that was the first incident of what they call a STEC, a Shiga toxin E. coli. And that was what was found in the burger meat and killed 4 children, unfortunately, and it was a really big thing. So the USDA, not long after that, did this study. And what it shows here, this is beef cattle. These are Angus cattle, and it's the effect of grain feeding on the colonic pH, so that's the pH of the colon, right, of the 4-chamber stomach, and E. coli count, so how much E. coli is in there, of cattle fed various amounts, right? So you'll see the 4 here. So the top one is no grain. It's fully pasture, it's hay and pasture. And you can see here, acid resistant E. coli, that's a STEC. That's a Shiga toxin. That's the one that gives you hemorrhagic E. coli that like breaks down your kidneys and is really bad. 0, essentially 0. They can't say complete 0, they have to say less than 1. So the top 2, no grain and moderate grain, no, hay was the top one, pasture, that one. No E. coli. Now we get into 60% grain. They call that moderate grain. Rolled corn, 25,118 CFUs. That's colony forming units per gram. That's too much E. coli. You don't even want it less than 10 in your laboratory results. The bottom one, 80% rolled corn. Now we're up at 251,000 CFUs per gram of acid-resistant E. coli. So what we're doing when we feed these cows grain is we're changing the pH of their colonic system, of their digestive system. Again, unbalanced, right? Microflora, by feeding them the wrong food, because soy and corn is not the species appropriate food for cattle. They're foragers, they eat grass. That's what they should be on, grass and hay and silage. So for that reason, we drop the pH just a little bit. And so what that does is we are actually harboring, just like MRSA, the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus stuff, because we overdo antibiotics, they become resistant. Well, this E. coli starts to become resistant to pH, right? And so the first line of defense in our stomach and in our dog's stomach is a low pH. That hydrochloric acid in our stomach is really the first line of defense in keeping these organisms at bay. So now we're teaching these organisms to be more resistant to acid, and we're pushing that pH down by feeding these cattle wrong. So this is kind of a man-made thing is what I'm trying to get at here. So for your question at the back, no grain. And so when they did this study, what they found is that the change in the microflora of the E. coli took 2 weeks. So if they took grass-fed cattle and they put them on grain, within 2 weeks, they saw the change in the rumen. Same for the reverse. If they took grain-fed cattle and put them on grass, after 2 weeks, they saw a reduction in the E. coli. So 100% grass-fed and finished is very important.
You can't do completely pasture raised, it's better to get grass finished, because hopefully they're eating grass for the last 2
There you
weeks
go.
of their life.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And typically the way it works in agriculture is almost every young calf or cattle goes on grass, and they do pasture for the first 18 months of their lives. And then to get them to that fattening weight where they take them to the abattoir, for a nicer word, they finish them on grain because it fattens them up fast.
So does that then raise that?
Yes, now you're back at this. So if so the USDA allows ranchers to put grass-fed on their label if at any time during that
They have
cow's
a bite
life.
of grass?
Yes, yes.
Yep.
So but the ones that are fully they'll say 100% grass-fed or grass-fed, grass-finished.
Yeah.
And so it's very important to look for that. Next slide.
That's why I also say a lot, like, people may go into like the Acme and buy like some ground beef and think they can feed that to their dogs. Well, the way the USDA looks at food regulation, they're assuming you're gonna cook that. And if you cook it at a certain temperature, that's gonna kill some of that bacteria. So I always tell people, you know, you're not doing your dog a favor by buying grocery store, you know?
Right.
Even if it's Whole Foods, you
Right.
know, you can't, I just feel you can't trust everybody.
All right, so, these are our recipes, and you probably can't see her, that's Mary Ann. Wednesday, we went to our sheep farm, Elmer and Rosanna in Likens, and the sheep's trying to steal some treats out of her hand.
Yeah.
And that's her in the pasture with one of her sheep best friends.
Yeah.
That's, our local Amish farmer, John, he's feeding some of his pasture. They do get a little bit of grain, it's an organic grain. The chickens, of course, they need it, they can't do fully grass, but he's, supplementing some grain there in our pasture raised. We do about 25% of our formula is fully pastured, chickens, whole chickens. And then the rest comes from an organic farm, Shenandoah Valley Organics, it's farmer focused. Happy to share all of our sourcing with you, where they come from. They do a great job. So our chicken and our beef are 100% non-GMO. I'm working on getting the pork 100% non-GMO. It's about 60-40 right now, and basically it's because I'm buying all the organic pork that they're processing, and then sometimes I have to supplement some more for it. But it still is antibiotic free. It's no steroids and still, GAP rated, Global Animal Partnership rated, so they are very much on to me. But some of the unique ingredients that we have in our formula, like chia seeds. The reason Chelsea wanted to put chia seeds in our diet was she was finding on a previous brand that was fermented, a lot of the feedback she was getting from her clients is, my dog's doing great, they love the food, they're not necessarily losing weight, but they're acting hungry. They seem hungry, like they're getting in the trash, or they're counter surfing, or they're acting like they're not satisfied, right? So Chelsea, in her brilliant mind, said, well, why don't we add some bulk? Well, just, you don't need a lot, a little goes a long way. Let's put like a 1/4 teaspoon of chia seeds in there and see if that helps slow that, because remember, they have a fast transit time, fast transit through the stomach. They don't, unless they're eating kibble, that's gonna be a little bit slower, but again, there's consequences to that, and we don't want them to do that. So it slows it down, it also absorbs a lot of water and bulks up a little bit, and so she did see good results with that, and her clients were saying that this is really helping. So the only thing I insisted is that we sprout them. Does everyone here know why you wanna sprout your grains?
It makes the grains and nuts more bioavailable and stops the production of the anti-nutrients.
Got it, exactly. So just by that, a short soak in some little bit of acidified water, you can add like a tablespoon of vinegar to a bucket of warm water, let them soak for 12 to 24 hours. You know, you don't have to see the sprout, it just cracks it open, and that's enough to reduce that phytic acid, those anti-nutrients, and now they become more available on that. So our chia seeds are sprouted in our diet. Whole fresh cod liver, we actually ferment that. We take the cod livers, frozen blocks of those. Again, we do that old style. I call it the Viking ferment, because that's what they did back in the Viking days, is they just fermented in salt, and we allow that oil to rise. And to your question, I'm sorry, what was your name? Heather's question on vitamin D, fermented cod liver oil. We have that available now, and that's made locally here. That's your best source of vitamin D. Yeah.
I have it on the table,
So
an
the-
empty bottle of it.
The chia seeds are in everything?
In all the diets, yeah, the not,
So if
not
I
in
get
the,
the chubs,
yes.
it's gonna be, okay.
Yeah, chia seeds are a very small amount, just about, little less than 1%, so, but in there for that bulk. And they do add some fiber and do add some of that. So wheat germ oil, I just don't, a lot of people go, oh, I don't wanna buy any food that has wheat in it. This is wheat germ oil, so I'm a fanatic about not only not using synthetic vitamins, I don't even like to use fractionated vitamins they're naturally sourced, but they're fractionated. So a lot of you will see on your treats and on your bags of food, it says mixed tocopherols, right? Mixed tocopherols is a fractionated form of vitamin E. It works, it's a preservative, it's a good antioxidant, it keeps fat from going rancid, it protects from oxidation. But the best source of it in a whole food form, so not only getting the mixed tocopherols, my minor was in chemistry, so I'm a really chemistry geek. So you have your 4 other isomers called your tocotrienols, and those are important again, all of that in whole food form. Wheat germ oil is absolutely the best source. Wheat germ oil and palm oil, and I can't source palm oil sustainably because they're wrecking the orangutan environments in the rainforest by growing palm oil. So we get a organic wheat germ oil from Sulu Organics. It's a really good brand, and that it provides our vitamin E. And vitamin E does degrade over time in freezer environment. So we add a healthy amount in here to keep that rancidity down. Fermented okra, as I mentioned, so that's a source of ferment. You're getting a source of ferment from the cod livers. You're getting a source of ferment from our sheep milk. Our sheep milk is cultured. That goes into our food as well. Sheep milk, surprisingly, is the one herbivore, it's closest to dog milk, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. But we're getting short on time, so I'm going to keep going because I have some cool studies to show you.
Go to the next.
Yeah. So this is an interesting study. So when we're thinking about, all right, how do we formulate a diet for a dog, right? How do we know what they should be eating? How should we get to this conclusion on what we should be sourcing as far as formulating on protein to fat to carbohydrates to macronutrients? This is a really interesting study done in Australia. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I want to say Mark Roberts. Mark Roberts presented this. He used to work for Canine Naturals. And what they did is took 15 dogs and they basically put them in a room with 3 different diets, equally distant, the diets, and put a monitor in there and sat outside and monitored these dogs. And one was a high protein diet, one was a high fat diet, and one was a high carbohydrate diet. And I'll talk about the actual percentages. So the protein diet had, this is energy from calories, right? So the calories percentage was 57 from protein, 42 from fat, 1% from carbs. The high fat diet was 13% protein, 86% from fat, 1% carbs. And then the high carbohydrate diet was 54% carbs. So you could go to the next slide. So what happened over a 28-day period, you'll see that these dogs, they're based on a feast and famine type of appetite. And that comes from their evolutionary existence, right? And because they're gonna catch prey, and it might be a week or more before they catch another prey. So the first 2 days, the dogs gorged on the high fat diet, okay? But only for the first 2 days. And then the rest of the 27 days, they mediated themselves to almost basically a 1-to-1 protein to fat ratio. And that's what we formulate to. So 1-to-1 by weight. So if I have 14% protein in my diet, I'm gonna put 14% fat in my diet. That ends up being about a 2-to-1 keto diet ratio. So they're getting, fat calories, there's 9 calories in a gram of fat, 4 calories in a gram of protein, 4 calories in a gram of carbohydrates, right? So that's how you're getting this metabolizable energy. So when left to their own devices without any influence from humans other than the diets were made for them, they chose basically a moderate protein, moderate fat, almost no carbohydrate diet. And so this is what their instincts are telling them to go to. And that's what we want to mimic. Next slide. So if you look at dog milk, okay, this is a study that was done out of China. on comparison, or I'm sorry, this one was in, is this Freeman? Yeah, that was actually Dr. Lisa Freeman that was on. This was in the US, and they took several different breeds, and they didn't really go into the breeds, but they went into the ages, but they were mixed breeds. And this is bitch's milk, basically. And you'll see protein 8 to 9%, fat 9%, sugars 3.5%. So dog milk is balanced by weight, 1-to-1 protein to fat ratio. Okay, so this is Mother Nature. This is what we want to mimic, right? So next slide, and the calories too. You can see. Sorry, the head's in the way there. 25% from protein, 63% from fat, 10% of the calories from basically lactose. That's the sugar in milk. If you go to the next one. This was another study. This one was done in China, and you can see. Check out the Rottweiler. Like, I have no idea why, and maybe Dr. Kurt would have a theory on this, but the Rottweiler milk, look how high in protein and fat that is, 17% on that, compared to like the lab at 8%, 9%. Like, do Rotties have a certain nutrient thing that they like? Do they grow super fast when they're young? That's just really, it's just a really interesting dynamic there. They are very much. But anyway, what I'm trying to show to you here is, again, that 1-to-1 protein to fat ratio. So don't be afraid of fat, please. It really is necessary. Next slide. This is Ivan Stolfus's dogs, the one that Sophia and Gabby have been working with. We had Ivan graciously collect some dog milk for us and send it to the lab to see, and these are supplemented with raw food. And sure enough, it's about that 1-to-1 ratio. This came out at 13% fat and about 10% protein. And you can see by Mother Nature alone, look at the calcium to phosphorus ratio, 0.24 in calcium, 0.2, naturally 1-to-1 on your calcium to phosphorus. So that's where we're getting our data, that's what we're trying to mimic, and that's what we do in our diets. And in the next slide. So our diets here are chicken recipe, pork recipe, and I'm sorry, there's a head right there. Sorry. So our protein, fat, and carbs. So 30% of the energy is coming from protein, 63% from fat, 7.5% from carbs. So very close to dog milk and very close to what those dogs chose on their own volition in that. And chicken, pork, and beef recipe, you guys can see that, the wheat germ oil. So this recipe is basically, so 85% is going to be your muscle, your organ, and your bone. And that ratio is around 55%, 60% muscle meat, 25 to 30% organ, 10% ground bone. And we found that 10% ground bone, if you start going up too high and you get past that 15%, you can instigate constipation, and so the stool gets really hard and very dry. And then less than 10%, your calcium to phosphorus ratio is off, and then you can get that right on that. So organic ginger is in there, that's fermented. So you can see the different ferments. We ferment our duck eggs. So in the beef and the pork recipe, it's duck eggs, obviously in chicken. If your dog doesn't have any sensitivities to chicken, we're going to use the chicken eggs, but we actually ferment those in whey. A lot of people don't understand that you can ferment protein and fat. Yes, sugar is typically what is fermented, but these organisms can have the ability to turn protein and fat into glucose just like we do. So that you can ferment cod liver, you can ferment an egg. It's just a little bit different fermentation process. Next slide. All right, I'm gonna keep this at an hour. This is our feeding calculator, and one of the things I'd like to point out, is the diets. So the diets themselves, if you take them to a laboratory, again, you do the 9 calories for fat, 4 calories for protein, 4 for carbohydrates. They come out to an average of 70 calories an ounce. But we actually do an absorption rate because this is fermented, because a lot of these microorganisms are working on these proteins, those enzymes. It's kind of like pre-digested a little bit for these dogs. And for that reason, we add a 25% absorption value. Now, not every dog is going to fall into this category. There's some dogs that just have a really high metabolic rate and they may need more calories for that. But for your standard couch potato dog, which most of our dogs are, that aren't getting a really high active lifestyle, you can figure on 88 calories an ounce, or somewhere in between that range. That would be so we often tell people start low. You often feed less of a fermented raw. Even if you're feeding a raw diet right now that doesn't have those fermented ingredients, you're gonna see that if you transition to solutions, you will feed a little bit less. Anywhere from 25% to 50%. I've seen people that switch from a standard raw where they're feeding 4 patties a day to their dog, and they switch to ours and they're feeding 2 to 2.5 patties. So really kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at the price. But our feeding calculator, if you go on the website, this is what it's going to calculate your dog's metabolic needs for at that 88 calories. Next slide.
And it's easy to do.
Yeah, so this is just kind of comparing, because a lot of people see $10.50 a pound and it's sticker shock and they get a little nervous. But your average raw diet at $7 a pound. So this is for 1,000 calories, which is typically a 50-pound to 60-pound dog. So if you look at what solutions would cost you per month, at the 88 calories per ounce, figuring that in, you're actually going to be further ahead at $225 a month.
That hat's blocking.
Yeah, sorry. Maybe leave it aside for a minute. At $258.
So it looks cheaper at the store, but
Right.
in the long run, you're feeding
So
more.
nutrient density matters, and caloric density matters. We have both a very nutrient dense and caloric dense food. And again, we want to feed our dogs for the best body score, to keep them trim and fit for the best longevity. Next slide.
That's exactly what
Can anybody guess what that is? Can you see from the picture? It's actually a barrel of our fermented okra from an aerial view, looking down on the barrel. That's our okra fermenting there. But so fermentation and food safety go hand in hand, and that's what we're using for our intervention for food safety. And it's basically called competitive inhibition. So we're using good bacteria to ward off bad bacteria. Yes.
I have a question. So I'm feeding my cat raw, but he's ill and he doesn't always eat it all, and I leave it sit in the dish. But then, we've been programmed to say to ourselves, "Oh, raw meat is so toxic." But how long is it safe to leave this food out without?
Are you feeding solutions?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go over that. That's a good segue to the next slide. So bacteria will not only, pre-digest the food, it discourages other, it competes with other pathogens, that may be in the food. Those micronutrients become more available. So I would say competitive bacteria rich raw foods, which are basically fermented, are a value added compared to just plain raw foods on that. Next slide, and I'm going to address your question. So we actually took our raw chicken and we did a challenge study on it, and we sent it to the lab. So we did two different, so we said, okay, what's the chicken doing when we get it home? And we thought, so this is 24 hours at room temperature. And these bars, so this was 5 different lots of chicken. I'm sorry, 4 different lots of chicken, no, 5. There we go, can't see that one. And we did, sent it out to the lab. We kept some in the refrigerator for 7 days, some in the refrigerator just for 48 to 72 hours. And then we left some out for 2 days, 48 hours basically, on the counter at room, this is room temperature, okay? This is lactic acid bacteria. Look at it grow.
So it's good.
Yeah, that's the bacteria you want. But it's almost better to leave the food out, 'cause look. So this is down here, that's half a billion, so that's 400 million CFUs per gram. Leaving it on the counter, chicken on the counter for 48 hours. So you can take it home and you can thaw it, and you can leave it in your fridge, and you'll see they do grow at refrigeration temperatures, and you'll get some growth, and you'll get some modest growth, and that's good, and that's competing with pathogens in your fridge. But heck, take it home and leave it. Oh, I forgot, I left my food out for my cat. I've had calls where people call me panicking. Oh, I've just spent $100 on your food. I left it in the trunk of my car. I forgot, and I came inside, and it's been out there for 4 hours. It's been out there for 10 hours. Get out. You know, I'll take you back if you're really scared, but feed it out. You know, you're not gonna have that problem. So the next slide is our pork, same thing. We did it on raw pork. And just by the way, we do not, our supplier, our vendor for pork, Valari Foods in North Carolina, holds our pork for at a temperature of -20 for, I think it's a minimum of 20 days. And that's the FSIS, Food Safety Inspection Protocol, the USDA protocol for trichinosis free. Okay, so they don't even release it to us till it's frozen at those temperatures, knowing trichinosis parasite would not be viable. Okay, so if anybody's scared about trichinosis, first of all, it's not really in pork anymore. Since the USDA stopped the practice of people feeding trash to pigs, and they used to literally feed street trash to pigs up until 1972 with dirty diapers and dead rats and whatever was in there. I kid you not. I'll show you on the CDC website. And then in 1972, they stepped in and they quashed that practice. And
So
once
is trichinosis the really only bad bacteria you should worry about with porks being left out?
it's one of the big, it's a
That
parasite.
20 days at 20
Renders it
kills
inviable.
Okay.
Even if it was there, it was inviable. But I don't even think the way our hogs are raised, and they're on a vegetarian diet, first of all, but they're omnivores. Pigs can get plenty of protein. They're not getting trash. They're getting really good food, and they are out. Some of them are out in pasture and so forth. So I don't think trichinosis is a problem. But we do the FSI. We take the time and do the protocol, and don't let it release it to us onto that. But this is our pork. Again, look at 48 hours at room temperature. That's 400,000 or 400 million CFUs per gram.
To clarify, this is because you have fermented components in the
Yes.
food, in case anyone's thinking you could leave your
Yeah,
chicken.
yes. This is a non-fermented raw food diet. I don't know what that's gonna look like. I don't know. This is a diet, and again, we don't ferment the meat. So like the meat, it's not a summer sausage, our diet, okay? It's not gonna be sour, but we just inoculate it. So if it's left out, it will ferment. This is gonna turn into a summer sausage after 3-4 days and get that sour component. I had a lady, this is an extreme case and I'm not recommending that anybody do this, but I had a very dear client that called me up and she says, oh, I just got solutions when we first came out with solutions and I'm so excited. I used the other fermented brand. I'm excited to try yours and you know, I've got a lot of knowledge with it. She's like, I was unpacking my 20-pounder and in my chest freezer. And she said, I came back out about 3 days later and I saw a chub sticking out underneath the chest freezer. It must have rolled out of the package, you know, and it was like kind of behind the chest. She said, I picked it up and I wiped it off and, you know, looked okay. And she said, you know, I took the casing off and it was kind of hard and dry on the outside and I cut it and it was still like, didn't smell bad. She's like, I fed it to my dog. She's like, do you think that's okay? I'm like, well, is your dog okay? Yeah, he seems fine. He loved it. Yeah, it was probably okay. Yeah, I mean, this is what you're getting. So that's a nice thing about a fermented raw diet is you can be a little bit temperature abusive with it, right? And it even gets better. But even in the refrigerator, you will start to see that growth. So don't be afraid to, I can't speak for other raws that don't have fermented lactic acid bacteria in them. But in our diet, we have such a plethora of it that when you warm it up to those temperatures where they're happy, they're gonna grow. I'm sorry, you had a question?
I'm currently dealing with a very particular cat and he's lost interest in all the flavors. So I've been buying ground lamb and adding that in and mixing it and hoping that I'm still okay.
You'll get some protection.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll get some protection, especially if you like take the lamb and push it in, and leave it in the fridge for maybe a day, and then take it out and then feed it to him on that.
Because you said, you know, Lucas told me to feed the dogs ground McDonald's hamburger meat is better than any dry kibble.
It's better than dry food for sure.
I would have to agree with you. It is better than dry kibble.
So, you know.
I'll die on that hill. I'll die on that hill.
So I'm thinking, oh, you know, every other food but theirs is gonna be terrible, but you're saying there's a level of safety if you're incorporating it in with yours,
Yes.
because it does give some protection.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And probably better if you're doing that, leave it out.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. This is.
I mean, when I tell people when they buy it and defrost it, put the dog's daily amount
Yes.
out and let it get to room
Yeah.
temperature because it's going.
I like to feed my dogs a warm, I don't like it too chilled, so my routine is 7 o'clock in the morning when I shuffle out to my garage, open the chest freezer, get my 2 chubs out, score the paper, rip it off, put it in the casserole dish, put a piece of parchment paper over it and leave it on the counter. And then they eat about 5 o'clock. Yeah,
And
they,
that's fine.
and that's fine.
We're also programmed,
I
don't do
know,
that.
I know. So, my background is in fermentation. So I went to grad school for cheese process, and I made mozzarella cheese for my grad. My grad work was funded by the pizza industry because they make so much mozzarella, and the pizza industry is so huge. They actually, normal mozzarella is aged for 60 days, right? And sits in these refrigerated warehouses for 60 days. And that's so that those enzymes can break it down, the proteolytic enzymes, and it gets stretchy and it's chewy and it oils off and it makes pizza great. Well, I was tasked with how can we do it in 30? We're gonna pay you a stipend as a grad student, put some more proteolytic cultures in there, get it to do it in 30. And you know what? You can't fool Mother Nature. It really didn't. We got a little bit, but it didn't work that well. But next slide. I digress. But yes, lactic acid bacteria is an incredible intervention method. I don't know why more manufacturers aren't using it. I really don't understand when you have HPP, you have irradiation, cooking it. Fermentation works great, and it's been millennia that we've used this, and it's a really good source. So our food safety, number one is sourcing. So we talked about the grass finished cattle, right? Same with our chickens, same with our pork. All of our livestock need to be on a species appropriate diet. That is going to make the best microflora. And so when you get to the butchering process, if that spills out, it's balanced. It's not going to be an unbalanced. You cannot do this fermentation intervention with Kafko meat. So that the confined animal feeding operations, the feedlot cattle, this intervention is not going to work with that because it's too contaminated to start. So competitive inhibition that provides that balanced microbiome and it protects the food, but it's not a kill step. I will warn you, okay? I'm gonna sit here, you're gonna hear this out of my mouth today. I am not gonna guarantee you that my food is salmonella free. Okay, chicken harbors salmonella, beef harbors salmonella, we harbor salmonella. Can I give you the confidence that the food is safe and your dog's not gonna get sick? Absolutely, 100%. But a PCR test, as sensitive as those are, and Kurt and Lucas and Sophia can talk about that, just because it pops positive on a PCR test does not mean that it's going to be at levels infectious. That is going to get you sick or your dog sick. So again, I'm not advocating for a bunch of pathogens in food, and you have to be hygienic. You have to know what you're doing. You have to do good manufacturing processes. We have a HACCP program in place. I'm not defending bad hygiene or anything like that, but we do harbor opportunistic pathogens, and there's 2,600 serovars of salmonella. That's the different species of salmonella. 12 of them get you sick, but FDA does not have decipher between. It doesn't matter on FDA. It's the genus Salmonella pops positive. They don't care if it's Salmonella Heidelberg, Salmonella typhimurium. Only 12 get you sick, and 2,600 of them exist. So we have to be educated on that and understand that that sweeping kind of let's just get it all out of our food for safety is not really what we want to do. Whole foods, I talked about that, not using any synthetic vitamins. So if I was using a premix from China or just a premixed vitamin, and I move a decimal point 1 over and I double the amount of vitamin D going into my food, I could blow out your dog's liver, okay, with the synthetic vitamin. So by using whole foods and getting my vitamin D from cod liver, from the eggs, from the milk, then I'm not, if I double the cod liver that's in my formula, or somebody makes a mistake and triples the amount of eggs or wheat germ oil, no dog's getting sick. The batch might be off, it might be a little bit unbalanced, but I'm not gonna blow out any dog's liver or anything like that. But in synthetic vitamins, if you make that mistake, that can be very deadly to a dog. So that's a food safety.
All kibble has synthetic vitamins.
Yes. Clean manufacturing, we clean up our processing environment with hot water and soap, and that's it. No chlorine, no halogens, no chemicals, no quats, ammonia quats. don't do it. It's not necessary. It's just really not necessary. So hot water and good scrubbing and soap is all we do. Next. Okay, herbs, I'm kind of out of time, so we're gonna go into questions, but we have a plethora of herbs, and if you go to our website, there's a detailed description of each of the herbs and what's in there and what they're for. Our most recent supplement though is the cod liver oil. We're fermenting those in-house, cause we use the livers, the fermented cod livers go into the food, and then the oil is now being bottled. And that's the best source of vitamin D for you. Yeah. And then, any questions? We're done. I know I talked fast.